The next big bit of tech news for this week is that the TikTok ban, or so-called TikTok ban, has been passed into law in the US. So what this basically means is TikTok needs to be divested from Chinese ownership in the next 270 days, in the next 9 months, or else it will be banned. So it's not currently banned, but the law is now in place. The clock is now ticking. For their part, TikTok and China have said, no dice, like, we're not doing this. They've started to take some retaliatory steps, I guess, against US companies. How do we think this will play out?
Well, they've got 269 days to make the capitalist dream come true, right? I don't see how you let all that market value disappear. You have a public, to Emil's point, who love it. If someone loves something, they're going to fight for it. So I'm pretty sure the capitalist structure, the domestic love for this is going to play out, and they'll find a local owner and excise themselves of whatever they think's going on.
Gosh, I did a lot of business in China in a very optimistic time between US and China relations from 2012 through 16. And the potential partnership between the countries was real. Like Mark Zuckerberg would go there and try to get Facebook sort of launched. WeWork had launched, Uber had launched, Airbnb had launched in China. And that all went away very quickly and dramatically in the last 5 years. So if you're the Chinese Communist Party, which ultimately I think makes this decision, they don't seem to care about money. Look what they're doing to their own companies. Alibaba, Tencent, they're like really crushing their national champions. So do they go, well, man, this could be worth $200 billion. We'd like that money in China and part of ByteDance. Or do they go, you know what? Let's cause some domestic unrest in the U.S. Let the young people go bananas. This is a much harder call because it's not just capitalism, because capitalism would dictate the outcome you're talking about, Leah. But this is wrapped up in global trade, sort of brinksmanship and control and so on.
Yeah, look, I mean, I was being slightly reductive in my answer, but what's going to be interesting is whatever China does with this, ByteDance does with this, it's going to be seen as their intentions towards the states. So to your point, if they say, we're going to let it roll, let's see what happens, let's let people fight for their TikTok, that's a statement of intent. And if they choose to divest and realize the value, that's also a statement of intent. So that's going to be really interesting to see how that unfolds, because I reckon a lot of people are going to draw some intent from that. And that's going to start inferring how people interact with the app, but also how they feel about China. Our feelings on it have evolved over the past 5 years. You know, the McDonald's diplomacy piece isn't going to hold for much longer, it feels like. I think it's all going to be about intent and whatever happens from there.
I think, Leah, the first position you articulated, I would say, is kind of the mainstream view amongst the commentariat at the moment, which is like, there's 270 days, there's a lot of money at stake, people love this thing, it'll work itself out. But I kind of agree with Emil, first of all, that this is not really about money. Yes, it's a lot of money, but this is like about superpower geopolitics. So, you know, money's fairly low down the list. And I also agree with you, Leah, that whatever happens is kind of going to be interpreted in that broader way. But there was one other angle I wanted to bring into this, which is, if you were a creator on the TikTok platform, what would you do? And what does that mean for this, right? Because I know what I would do, which is I would spend more of my time investing in Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts, because I know that those things are not getting banned. And so I wonder if, to a certain extent, this becomes not a self-fulfilling prophecy, but by the time those 9 months roll around, a lot of the value in TikTok has been destroyed. And I guess one thing I'm not sure about, I don't quite understand, is does TikTok, their much vaunted algorithm, like, is their algorithm still that much better than what Instagram Reels or YouTube Shorts has? Or is their main advantage at the moment simply that that is where the most content is? And could there be a creator flight to these other platforms that neutralizes that advantage, such that by the time any of this happens in 9 months, people are like, well, TikTok is no longer the dominant short video platform where all the kiddies are?
We need to find a creator to ask. There does seem to be this really well manufactured, this just die hard, do not take this away from me. There seems to be more love for it than you get in like love for Instagram Reels or Threads or whatever Shorts has come out. So I wonder if, to your point, Emil, do they band together and try and actually double down and say, nope, this is ours, you're not taking this away, we've made businesses off of here. It's also going to be interesting for the government to work out, how do you take away someone's livelihood, potentially, in that scenario? Like, in the name of national security, are we taking away millions of people's livelihood in the States?
So my prediction is this gets tied up in lawsuits on lawsuits on lawsuits in the US, and it just gets kicked down the road, and ultimately it ends up in some compromise where TikTok's allowed to exist. It doesn't have to spin off, but there's some like monitors on how the data is managed and where it goes and that sort of thing. It's just too big a part of people's lives. And there are some the American legal system is not like designed to ban stuff that easily. So there's not like this propaganda can't infiltrate other places. So I think you get to a place where it just gets kicked down the road, and then there's some sort of like, well, we're going to make sure that we look at where the data leakage goes and who's controlling the inputs on the algorithm and blah, blah, blah. That's my guess. It's really hard to take this away from people, and it's really hard to spin it off. It's not that simple. And there's a lot of money to spin off. And this just should be a grand game of chicken. And I just think grand games of chicken end up getting delayed when there's geopolitics involved.
That's what's interesting about the way this law has been set up, which is it is a countdown clock. Right? So nothing needs to happen from here on in for the ban to go into effect. The ball's in TikTok's court, which, like you said, they're definitely going to play that ball and, it's going to go to the Supreme Court and all of that, no doubt. I just think it's interesting in terms of differentiation because TikTok is not a traditional social network. People don't have a dense social graph there. What TikTok is the place where all the best content is uploaded and a fantastic algorithm for distributing it to the people who find it interesting. And again, if I was a creator, I'd be thinking about hedging my bets. But also, if I were YouTube and Instagram, I would be quite aggressive in sowing that fear, uncertainty, and doubt, right? Actually going to TikTok creators saying, TikTok's being banned at 9 months. Why don't you come over to us? Let's offer you some incentives, some inducements, a program for the best TikTok creators to come across to YouTube Shorts. I think they could do a lot of damage to TikTok in the next 9 months, just in that environment of uncertainty. And I wonder if, by the time that happens, people won't be as passionate about their TikTok anymore because they'll start migrating to these other places too. But I guess time will tell.
It's an interesting play for Spotify as well. They did a big content bid. It worked well. Daniel has taken a real cut to the business to make it hyper efficient, hyper productive. They had a great earnings, and now he's openly come out and said, we're back on track for growth. We're going to invest in marketing, in growth. If there's a window of opportunity on content to pull content over, it's a completely different business. It's a completely different format. It's a different segment. But there's something interesting here for Spotify, who are ready and raring to spend some money, and potentially a ton of creators that are going to be homeless and want a new place to come and create. So let's see what Spotify does.
Interesting. What I'd love to understand about Spotify is whether they're having any luck with video, because my feeling is they're not. They've done a great job, as you say, Leah, kind of expanding from music to other audio formats, and that they own audio pretty well. But, Spotify does allow you to host video podcasts. And in fact, the Startup Podcast uploads our video to Spotify. But from my analytics, I don't think many of our Spotify listeners are actually watching the video. I know I don't when I'm listening to podcasts. So I think that's going to be their interesting challenge. But I agree that I'm glad you brought them into the mix, because I think they are making a big play for content, and user-generated content makes sense as their sort of next frontier.
Well, look, buying Joe Rogan is a much different thing than like having this platform where stuff rises to the top. I get the Joe Rogan thing, and I think it was smart. I don't quite see how they do everyone goes there just to watch cool videos. I think it's more likely to be on Instagram and YouTube. But also, like, if you're a creator, you just post on all three, don't you? Sure, YouTube says, hey, come do it on YouTube. You're like, I kind of do it already. It just doesn't get that many views.
I mean, definitely you're right. My suspicion as somewhat a creator, although more on the podcast side, but we play in YouTube especially and a little bit on TikTok, is it's a question of what platform you optimize for, because these are algorithmically boosted platforms, right? If you want to be really successful, yes, you have to create good content, but you need to engage, you need to optimize for whatever the algorithm is doing. You need to stay on top of things. So the question is, okay, at the moment, the TikTok creators are optimizing for TikTok, and they'll upload to YouTube because why not? But they probably don't really care how it performs. Maybe they start caring how it performs on YouTube. They start changing their content and their posting strategy to fit YouTube a bit better. And I think that's really how things maybe start to change.
Going to get kicked down the road, man. We're going to be talking about this in 2026.